Politicians than technocrats, a shift from his predecessor's cabinet model. Will Ruto's most trusted allies deliver on his promises? Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua says he speaks his mind and loves to tell the truth, but at what cost? His latest remarks on foreign exchange has the central bank refuting his claims publicly, insisting the country has enough forex. Tonight we discuss the new and fifth administration that is days old in office. Good evening and welcome to Pundits Night. As always, remember you can be part of these discussions. Send us a message on 22047. The hashtag to use is Pundits Night. Just a reminder of who our guests are, as earlier publicized. With me in studio is Joshua Kiptoo, is the former speaker, second speaker of Nandi County. Caleb Amisi had confirmed his attendance for this program. I understand he is on his way and will be joining us here in studio to continue with this discussion. Nonetheless, the show has to continue. Mheshimiwa, good evening. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you very much, Abuakar, for your invite. And this comes at a very important time for us to discuss where we are as a country. And it was, as I told you, offset. It was easy selling a manifesto. It was easy selling an agenda for either of the teams, that is Azimio and Kenya Kwanza. But what happens is that there can only be one winner, one government. And the president, William Ruto, is on the spot. It is about William Ruto's government. It is about the promises we made and gave to the people. So for the next 5 years, no one will talk about alternative view, but about the performance of the Kenya Kwanza government led by the president. Fair enough, which leads me to my first question. Days in office, what is your general assessment of the Ruto administration? Thank you very much. I think the president has acquainted himself very well with the job and the responsibility. He comes with the advantage of having served as a deputy president, having served as a cabinet minister in the Grand Coalition government, but importantly before then he was equally an assistant minister and briefly as a minister in the Moi regime. So that comes with a wealth of experience on as to how government runs. There are two aspects that I want to credit. Number one, you see the calmness and composure in handling issues right from day one, in terms of there was no hurry in chasing the cabinet of the outgoing president or the former president. The cabinet has up to today met and the president has ensured there has been very smooth transition. No single officer has been hounded out except for the resignation of the DCI boss, George. Yes. But for the rest, you've seen there's been that smooth transition. That is contrary to, for example, county governments, where governors are sworn in and in 15 minutes they dismiss everyone on the spot. So that is number one. Number two, the easy fixes, easy wins, things that don't need a lot of effort or a lot of legal or let's say legislative backing. He actually executed them on the spot. He gave a promise that the first thing he will do, he'll swear in the judges. He did it on the second day. And subsequently, he's shown his intention to implement. One of the things I want the viewers to follow very critically, it is never a problem to implement manifesto. But the biggest problem this country has faced for the last 4-5 elections since multipartyism started is the political question. Keeping of your political promise, because the foundation of a successful administration is politics. He has done very well. Let me interject you. You talk of quick fixes. Credit to the president. Among the things he did was to appoint the 6 judges that were rejected by the previous administration. Yes. Allocated more budget to the judiciary, transferred the police budget to Police for Independence, give them held his second cabinet meeting today, reduced the fertilizer prices. But is it not the case that the cost of living, which Kenyans complained about, which the president campaigned on as a campaign tool, is still relatively high? It is high because of the tough decisions, and that's now what leadership is all about. The cost of living has shot up because of one important component. The subsidy on fuels have been removed. We no longer enjoy the subsidy on fuel. And the fuel subsidy has a direct correlation on the cost of living because every single thing stems, every aspect of production stems from prices of fuel. Why did the president and his team see it fit to remove the subsidy? It was unsustainable. The amount of money that the government would be spending for the remainder part of this financial year made it completely unsustainable. We are living beyond our means. And I think it is only that in campaigns that you never tell people the hard truth. But there is one thing the president, even during the debates, he said that he will be honest. And the first honesty was removal of the subsidy because it is unsustainable, and says in the short term, It will be painful. And indeed, the prices have gone up because of that aspect. However, are we still hemorrhaging our finances through an unsustainable fuel subsidy? No. Does it mean not even in the long term, in the medium term, the moment we get it right with a balanced budget, not just the fuel subsidy, are you aware that is equally mandated the newly constituted budget committee in parliament to look for 300 billion to be slashed?
From the current budget.
From the current budget.
Absolutely. And my question rather, Kiptoo, is the president had promised as though he has a silver bullet to deal with the cost of living.
Yes.
He rubbished the global effects that led to the rise in the cost of living.
Yes.
He rubbished in his campaigns the Ukraine-Russia tough,
yes,
the global prices of increase in commodities. But he is now telling Kenyans exactly what he rubbished, isn't he?
He didn't rubbish per se. Let's say he downplayed. I use the word downplay. And you know, politics, I have participated in politics personally and campaign. And every citizen watching us has participated by virtue that they are the one to be wooed. It is just like wooing or trying to sweet talk someone. So you have to say all the right notes. The point he made during campaigns was that he downplayed the impact of the global aftershocks, like the war in Ukraine, as to what impact it has. According to him, it's a two-way traffic. There is what the government can do and intervene within here, and at the same time we have the global shocks. So maybe in his campaign, because I was part of the team that used to sell the agenda, we heavily sent the message that we can fix this right from the doorstep. And that is why you see us doing that by saying, let us focus on production. Food contributes to 50% of the cost of living. If we can sort out the production of food and have it being cheaper, then it means automatically, I may not speak so authoritatively as an economist, but that is what economists have solved. The moment you handle 50% of the cost of living, which in this case is food, automatically it has an impact on inflation. However, as a president, we only have one president, and he's done his tour, went to the UK for the Queen's funeral, addressed the UNGA, that is the United General Assembly, and had the ability to meet world leaders, but importantly get the briefs. This is why now he can speak with authority and say, despite just the interventions we are doing, we also are cognizant of the aftershocks of the global fight in Ukraine.
And how much of a test will this be to the electorate who voted for him?
A serious one.
Slightly over 7 million.
I will tell you, it is the most significant test in the short term. Between now and December, the agenda will be one. We voted in a hustler president. The person who suffers the most is a hustler. When the cost of living are high, the urban poor and the rural poor. And those are the core people who voted for him. So it's a severe test. It will call for patience. What I'm extremely happy with the supporters of Kenya Kwanza and generally the people in the Republic, they listen to his asking that yes, it will get painful for the short term, but in the medium term and the long term, as at the close of this financial year, we'll be telling a different story.
All right, let's move away from the question of the cost of living and get to what some fault the new administration for, which is the language, and some indicating that the duo, and in particular the deputy president, seems to be still in a campaign mode. Is it so? In my global intro, I noted of him saying he loves to speak the truth and speaks his mind.
Now, we are different personalities. Just like between me and you, how I approach issues is not the way you approach issues.
Absolutely.
I think it will be not possible for us to box people into what we expect, how they do things. However, you can see a complete difference between how the deputy president, Rigathi Gachagua, converses and raises issue versus the president. The president carries a lot of weight and has to do a lot of balancing. The deputy president, Rigathi Gachagua, has to speak, has to be on the spot. And there is no better way than being honest and straightforward. I think his approach, being straightforward and honest and shoots directly, maybe it unsettles some quarters. I would rather you criticize and judge him on whether it is factual or not factual, but the manner or mode, live and let be. I have accepted personally, for example, how I speak and how I articulate issues. It may not be how someone else does it. The only question would be, I think Rigathi Gachagua approach is not what Kenyans are mostly used to. Someone who speaks speaks his mind. He doesn't hold it. Most of us do that only on social media by texting.
It's not necessarily the truth, isn't it? Like today you had a statement from the central bank which said that the claims the deputy president made were untrue. There are those who say when you see the deputy president, for instance, in public, he speaks what the president cannot speak because he is the president.
Okay.
Is that narrative as well?
Not necessarily. The president can speak for himself, but you can't get an easy interview with the president compared to the deputy president. Look at President William Ruto. The last 5 years or 10 years, it was easy to get him down on an interview. But now as a president, it becomes difficult. His tray is full. But for the deputy president, he's available and has to speak on behalf of government. Quickly, let me add something. It's not about untrue statements, but rather a clarification. What the CBK did, it clarified that the issue of forex was not just exactly how the deputy president said it, and human is to error. Possibly it didn't come out clearly the way the deputy president expected it to come out, and it was incumbent upon the CBK to correct and assure people the issue about the forex. So the message went home that, one, we are having a challenge with foreign exchange. As to the manner how we got ourselves into is where there was a disparity of opinion. And number two, how to deal with it. And that's how the CBK, being the entity in charge of Kenya's monetary policy and the authority in that area, saw it fit to correct so that we don't have any destabilization in the markets. And I think that's what happened. Such things happen. Even me here on an interview, I may by mistake make a statement that is not completely true. Half of it may be true, half of it basically by an omission, not intentionally. That again will be taken. And that's why you haven't seen the Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua possibly admonishing CBK. It's because they just clarified an aspect of his statement.
What the Deputy President says is truth-telling and being honest with Kenyans has been described by some as abrasive, hard-hitting roughness. Should that worry of a possible chemistry issues between him and the president?
I doubt, because in his statements, he keep referring to his boss. Number two, so much attention and focus are on Rigathi Gachagua because the cabinet of Kenya Kwanza are yet to settle and are yet to be sworn in. The moment you have the cabinet fully constituted and having being approved by the legislature and given a chance to start executing their mandate at their respective dockets, this is the time now you'll want to hear from Kipchumba Murkomen as roads minister. You'd want to hear from Professor Kithure Kindiki as interior. And with that, focus shifts away. There'll be a better dissemination because he's not. In fact, Rigathi Gachagua is literally carrying the burden for the entire government. The president may not be available for every single interview, so Rigathi has to carry the burden of representing the president, but at the same time carrying the burden for the rest of the departments that are yet to be fully considered because we only have nominees. As soon as the nominees are sworn in and in office, trust me, when it matters finance, no one will bother going to the deputy president, but they'll go straight to Professor Ndung'u, who is now the incoming cabinet secretary for finance or the treasury, and he'll be able to articulate and give specific information because that is the area of the docket. So I would ask Kenyans to be patient, and these are the teething problems that always happen when an administration comes in. It is normal, and as I was saying when I first began my initial comment, the president has actually tried as much as he can to ensure smooth transition, and I want to credit that maturity. If you're seeking maturity, look at how the president has done it. There's been no rush or hurry to chase or remove anyone, but rather listen and deal with the thing. Who would imagine that at this point an outgoing cabinet would still consider a resolution chaired by the president, and some of the cabinet members actually campaign against him? Peter Munya, being the current agriculture minister, was under his docket.
Is it not the view that you view it as a maturity? Some others, and I'm sure you must have come across this narrative, that some view it as a humiliation, time to prove who the real boss is now.
If it was humiliation, why would he adopt a matter that has been pending by the same cabinet? The president has actually adopted what they have been pushing for. If it was about proving that I'm the boss, he would have called them and dismissed them and sacked them on the spot and told them, now, you see, I'm the president, go home. No, he's actually told them, appraise us. Where are we? Help us on transition. Do you remember on issue of the inauguration? It is the current team that delivered, and William Ruto as a president actually acknowledged and said, if there's one thing you will appreciate, it's them. Can I surprise you? Today, as he was making pronouncement on the housing program, he was actually working with the Cabinet Secretary Macharia and PS Hinga. 100% of his statement, he kept referring to the current team that PS Hinga has mentioned to us 1, 2, 3. That tells you he's not there to humiliate, but rather he's carrying on. By the time his PSS will be coming in, which may be 2, 3 weeks or a month away, the current PSS would have gone. Nothing stops. Look at the agriculture consideration on matters famine. He has actually relied on the advice of the current team, not new team. What more do you want?
So they are not as bad as they were painted?
Not at all. In fact, politics, and this is a funny thing, and Kenya should appreciate this, politics is about competition of ideas. The moment an idea wins and you're given a responsibility, once you become the leader. When I was vying to be a speaker in 2017 and I became a speaker, not all MCAs voted for me. But the moment I am pronounced as a speaker, I am the speaker of the entire house. What happens therefore? You do like an orchestra. You turn your back to the audience and play the tune. The audience will only appreciate when they see the results. So what happens? The moment the president was sworn in, it was no longer a matter about Matiang'i said this, Munya said that. That is not the business of the president. He needs them. He needs Matiang'i to appraise him on the current situation on interior docket. For example, when we had issues in West Pokot and Baringo and Turkana, when you have people being killed, you are sure that the security briefings are done by the people currently in office, including the National Security Council, who are accused of sabotaging his win. But he sits with them.
All right, you're watching Pundits Night. Remember, you can be part of this discussion. Send us a message on 22047. The hashtag to use is Pundits Night. For purposes of fairness of this discussion, we had equally invited Saboti Member of Parliament, Caleb Amisi, who I understand is on his way, so the show has to nonetheless continue. Let's talk of what the president did last week, which is to name his cabinet.
Yes.
He has named a cabinet that has politicians,
yes,
some who have won on the 9th of August, yes, some who lost,
yes,
which is a shift from what the Uhuruto had promised in 2013,
sure,
of having a cabinet that will not have politicians, even though there were some politicians even in that cabinet. What does that shift indicate, Kiptoo, to you?
It indicates it's a question of an administration that is keen to learn lessons. The president was lucky to have served 10 years under Uhuru administration, and he saw the pitfalls of just having pure technocrats. And I remember Kenyans complaining by mid-first term of President Uhuru. And you could see when Uhuru came for second term, he mixed. The idea of bringing in politicians is not starting with the president. It started with Uhuru in the second term.
Yes.
The lessons they learned in the first 5 years was that you can't have Puritan cabinet that is purely technocrats. Leadership is about a careful balance, about political management and competence. If you can have a careful balance of the two, it works. Number two, we've had 40, 50 years of a culture of elected politicians sitting in cabinet. You can't just eradicate that culture too fast. And that's what President Uhuru learned during his first 5 years. And that's why in the second term, that is why you are able to see, for example, Ukuri Yatani, who had served as a governor, came in as a CS Treasury. You could see Peter Munya came in as Agriculture Minister.
Charles Keter.
Charles Keter had to resign.
Yes.
That is towards in fact, he was the first politician who sat in that cabinet. So President William Ruto has learned the same and has just sought to carefully balance the two. Number two, Kenyans are politically emotive. The moment they vote for a particular administration, they expect to see the faces they know to be the CSS. And I think the president wanted to walk that tightrope, whereby there is the aspect of political management. And one of the things I've been saying, political scientists will tell you, politics is the foundation of economic development. You cannot divorce politics from economy. If you don't have managed politics, it becomes a problem. William Ruto goes into his administration the first 100 days with calmness. By virtue, he's been able to keep his word on all his allies. For example, from legislature right to the cabinet, there'll be peace, there'll be calmness within Kenya Kwanza. Now he will get the time and attention to focus on delivery. He will not have any excuse. He will not come tell you, oh, we were facing in fightings. You remember in 2003, when Kibaki failed to honor the MOU, all hell broke loose. All the good promise of NAC went to nothing. 2007 happened because of that. When Grand Coalition happened, political bickering affected them not to achieve 100%. When Uhuru came in the first term, they were purely a technocrat cabinet, that the political management became an issue. And at some point, the pressure from legislature was so much that the president and the deputy had to step in. In the second time of Uhuru,
but Kiptoo,
let me finish this. On the second time of Uhuru, handshake as a politics completely affected how second term could run. So you find that William Ruto is coming in as a historian and say, let me manage the politics so that it gives me the foundation. So that even if you get a cabinet secretary who you feel is not competent, educationally speaking, the PSS will be able to cover that. And I can assure you, the CS is the political head of a ministry. But the work done, don't discount the input of the technical team, right from the people at the director level all the way to the PS. That will count. As long as there's leadership in the ministry, you'll see the results.
Kiptoo, the president, has an ambitious program titled The Plan.
The Plan.
Which is futuristic in nature, which involves a lot of technocratic abilities to be done.
Yes.
Do you believe the cabinet that is mentioned, with respect, with members like Aisha Jumwa, Mithika Linturi, politicians like Aiden Duale, Kipchumba Murkomen, and the education CS, who has no background in education, will deliver on his promise? Isn't that not a risk to take per se?
There's no better person to deliver than the person who sold the agenda. I've been on record selling Kenya Kwanza agenda. Give me an opportunity. I don't need to be tutored or trained on what I need to do, because I was the one who used to sell. So the advantage of the cabinet secretaries you've mentioned, from Aisha Juma to the rest, that is what they did for 6 months, if not 1 year. They kept hammering and selling the message. Kipchumba Murkomen was on record speaking right from the Senate floor all the way to the campaign trail, what Kenya Kwanza can do. Now it is the time for them to deliver. Adan Duale, coming from Garissa, which is a garrison county, which is more or less like the border with Somalia. He's been passionate about Somalia. That is about the defense forces, the Kenyan KDF in Somalia. He's been speaking authoritatively about it and kept saying that when Kenya Kwanza government come, we'll do consultation and all that. Who is a better person than that person to be given a chance to deliver? Number two, leadership is about ability to listen and to be advised. When you have politicians, and politics teaches you that you cannot succeed as a politician if you're not a listener. If you are not a good listener to your own campaign team or to the citizens, you cannot win an election. By virtue they are good listeners, that's why they won elections. And that would make them better leaders as CSS, because they would be in a position to listen to the professional advice of the team within the cabinet ministries. And remember, President William has shown the way. You cannot throw the baby and the bathwater. When you get into a department, take time to acclimatize and pick the people within. The data they can give you can go an extra mile. I'm confident, in fact, you'll be surprised. The so-called politicians will actually deliver than you expect.
The test of time will definitely
we are all here
as others, God willing. Let's talk of Parliament, which resumes tomorrow, both the two houses. There are questions of which political affiliation is the majority and who is the minority. In your understanding, who is the majority in the National Assembly?
It's a very good question. It's a legal question. And having been a lawyer, I can answer that with a straight face. In law, there's what we call by law and by fact, de jure and de facto. And by law, if you are to strictly rely on the figures and agreements deposited with the Register of Political Parties, Azimio has a bigger number of MPs based on what they classified in the registrar's register. But circumstances have changed subsequently after the general election.
In what way?
The moment the general elections were called for Kenya Kwanza, a chunk of members of Azimio crossed over to Kenya Kwanza. I'll pick 3 parties. PA, which is a Costarian party, crossed post-nomination in May. But the law could not allow them to exit Azimio coalition. Maendeleo Chap crossed post-nomination, but the law couldn't allow them to exit. So the two of them campaigned for Kenya Kwanza, going to the general election, but they were hemmed in by the law. The earliest they can exit is November. You come to UDM.
Which is 3 months after the
3 months after the election, which is November. UDM was with Azimio up to 9th August. Post-election, they crossed over to Kenya Kwanza. So those 3 parties, together with their MPs, are affiliated to Kenya Kwanza, but by law that binds them as political parties to stick to Azimio. On paper, Azimio would say to be my majority. But by fact, that's why I say in law there's de jure and there's de facto. De jure is that the letter of the law. But by fact, if you are saying now let's count the numbers, the numbers are with Kenya Kwanza. And that is why they picked all the leadership positions, Speaker, Deputy Speaker, both at the National Assembly and the Senate. And this conversation is only on National Assembly. On the Senate side, Kenya Kwanza has if we were to rely on the figures at the Registrar of Political Parties, Kenya Kwanza has one more senator than Azimio. But with the change of circumstances post-election, the gap even increases to more than 4 or 5, inclusive of the nominated senators. So I know the Speaker will have to make that decision. The reason you've seen a delay is the dilemma the Speaker faces. Because
you say the Speaker will make that decision.
He has to make that ruling.
The Speaker, to be fair, is
Wetangula.
Immediate former Bungoma
that
Senator
is Right Honorable Moses Wetangula.
In the Kenya
Kwanza coalition, yeah.
Of Ford Kenya's party leader, to say the least.
Yes.
But isn't that not a foregone conclusion?
It's not a foregone conclusion. Why do you forget in 2007, Kenneth Marende was elected by ODM. So he was an ODM speaker. But the first ruling he gave was against ODM, because he ruled that people have to swear in by the name of the president. And at that time, the presidency was contested. The ODM members led by Ababu Namwamba pledged to swear by Raila Odinga. But 10-20 minutes after the election of Marende, he made that ruling and said the law bars swearing in against the name of someone who's not been sworn in as a president. And he told the ODM brigade, you have to swear by the name of President Mwai Kibaki. So the same thing will apply. Wetangula will have to apply the law. I understand UDM has gone to court to try court constitutional provisions that gives them the right to they have their political freedom and right to decide who to associate with, which is true. It is a careful balance between the letter of the law, in this case, whatever the Political Parties Act and the amendment that was adopted before nominations that now hems them in up to November. Possibly the Speaker will have to do mediation. That is what having been a Speaker, that's a political question. The legality has to be mixed with politics. I'm pretty sure he'll call around the table the two sets of leadership, because both sets have already elected their persons, so that one set will definitely be the majority, the other will be the minority. That, look at the absurdity here. If Azimio insists and they are given the majority, it will only last 2 months, because October, then as soon as we hit November 21st, all the parties that are still closed at Azimio will have crossed over to Kenya Kwanza, and the majority will be absolute.
Let me get the legality of this right.
Yes.
The determination will be based on which party or a coalition that has the majority.
Yes.
It is the coalition.
It is a coalition. It is a coalition. The law recognizes the coalition, and both are coalitions. Azimio coalition as well as Kenya Kwanza coalition.
What of the narrative?
There's a dispute as to whether Azimio is a coalition of parties or a coalition party. That is another determination the Speaker has to make. Kenya Kwanza has already contested that Azimio registered as a coalition party. Yet, they are supposed to register as a coalition of parties, just like Kenya Kwanza.
And in the event that you are a coalition party, the law requires...
Then we count the number of MPs, and we will then count members elected under Azimio, not ODM, not Wiper. Because a coalition of parties means constituent parties. Kenya Kwanza is not a party. It's a coalition of UDA, Ford Kenya, ANC, and the rest. Azimio, the expectation should be the same. But if technically they registered a coalition party, then that becomes a question. And I think that's a question of semantics. It is up to the courts as well as the Speaker to determine on that.
All right. Another issue that Kenyans are talking about in regards to the new administration is the role of religion in the state and in the politics of the state. We have seen quite a number of times both the President and, with respect, the First Lady host religious leaders from Kenya, I believe Nigeria, equally Ghana. Whereas the Constitution, and you know the Constitution better than I do, dictates that there will be no state religion, there are Kenyans who are taking an offense with the level in which religion is promptly playing a role in Kenyan politics.
I think it's a very good question, and I've been following social media concern about that. One, our Constitution offers freedom for religion. Number two, Kenya is a secular state. There is no one religion that overrides the other. That's why we have freedom of religion, and there is no overriding religion over the rest. And once it comes to that, this is a legal question. Where does individual rights, where is the boundary between individual and collective rights? And these are, I have taught a topic in law called jurisprudence, which is philosophy of law. It talks about morality of law. And it talks about the different schools of thought about how we perceive what law is. And one of the questions that jurisprudence has never answered conclusively, we always have disparity depending on the school of thought you come from, is the boundary between individual versus state rights or versus collective rights. A section of Kenyans may comment as to what you say. They may feel that the more we see a lot of prayers and services at State House, they feel that it is going overboard. But I'll answer you by telling you they are doing nothing wrong. Ideally, what they have done, they are just publicizing what would have been done or has always been done without the cameras. The First Lady has decided to make State House to be an open door policy, where she said she wants to make it home for everyone. They are elected from a humble beginning, and she will open up the doors of State House and show what they do, so that people are agitated purely because they see the services that have always been done, because they are not, I don't think prayers are done Monday to Monday. It's basically on a Sunday, for example. That is for the Christians. And that's what the First Lady does. By virtue of the publicity that is given, that is when, for once, people are conscious. The difference with the former presidents is that they never showcased that. The last time we had such a case was President Moi, except that he never hosted mostly in State House. He used to undertake it mostly in churches. The only difference between Moi and President William Ruto is that William Ruto has hosted both at State House and has gone to churches. Moi used to do the same thing, in fact more, but going to churches. So it's a question of preference, and I don't think they're infringing on everyone's rights, and it should not be construed to mean that it is more or less like saying that Christianity is the state religion. It can't be. Constitution cannot allow the president to even proclaim that. Freedom of worship and religion is enshrined in our constitution, and that is sacred. I cannot tell a Muslim right now that that is a state religion, and the same applies to even atheist. They have a right to exist, and they can handle whatever they do. I would be very happy. Personally, I would be very happy. I know this conversation will, I'm sure very soon you'll see the president inviting the Muslim community, and you will see Salah being conducted there. And I hope everyone will now say perfect. At least Hindus tomorrow will be invited to also do their prayers. So let it not be construed that it is a question of a state religion. Never. It can never be. Our constitution is absolutely clear. And since independence, there's never been a case of a state religion in Kenya. We remain secular and nothing will change.
You talked of Moi. Many have a comparison. Of course, the president was a one-time political student of the then Moi. We have seen him get to action respectfully and rightfully upon the swearing in. We have seen him admonish prayers in the church. We have seen him traverse the country to regions some would say did not even vote for him, and these are his early tours. How much of Moi is Ruto the Moi second?
Hands-on. One comparison I'll give Moi versus William Ruto. Their style of leadership is hands-on and proactive. Look at the first 3 years of Moi as a president, between 78 and 82. History records that he was extremely proactive and went out of his way, building gabions and everything. He was on the go, and he was doing so many events. Remember, up to the point he was retiring, President Moi could do up to 13 events in a day. Moving and doing all. I see the similarity with William Ruto. He's in office, and that's why even the press mentioned that it is business unusual. On Sundays, he's on the move, goes to church, address a rally. Today, he's not just addressing pressers, he's not just sitting with meetings. He'll do a meeting in the morning, in the mid-morning, he's picking delegations, ambassadors and the rest. By 12, he's already, like today, he was doing housing. On Friday, he was addressing other aspects on, remember the issue of Fuliza? So, one, they are proactive. Both of them are super active and hands-on. And that's why at the moment you haven't feel the pinch much of an absent cabinet. And I think it will be much easier for William the moment the cabinet comes in. The second similarity, I find them to be articulate. President Moi in his formative years was extremely articulate, more or less like a better version of Jomo Kenyatta. William Ruto, so far so good among the 5 presidents, has been the most articulative among them. Lastly, I think they are consumers of good advice, whether economical, whether security and the rest. Moi was credited being an avid consumer of security briefs. I think the same can be said of William Ruto. That is why he is up to speed with issues. Remember what happened in Kapedo the other day in Turkana South. He was up to speed and addressed the nation immediately on the same. Look at the issue of famine, same thing. So I find those are the similarities. The difference maybe would be possibly William Ruto will achieve more than President Mo. Godspeed. We pray for God to give him good health.
All right, and Kiptoo, finally, perhaps one question. The president, of course, had competitors in the general election who wanted equally to be the president of this country. You had Professor George Wajakoya, and notably you had Raila Odinga, who came a distant close second. What next for Odinga in your view? 5th time he sought the presidency, 5 times he has lost.
I think for President Raila Odinga, I would only have at most respect. I may not even have enough accolades to give and to describe what is done and achieved for this country. But human being being human being, and we being humans, the way and everything has a beginning and an end, he's had his moments, highest moments. Maybe not a single person may get to a level he's got to. Even President William Ruto acknowledges that bit in terms of having loyal supporters and in this case, avid loyal supporters and being a game changer in every election cycle. If you look at the last 6 elections or 5 elections, 2002, 2007, 2013, 2017, and 2022, this is a man who has dictated the tempo of the game. 2002 up to 2022, 20 years, Raila has been at the center of every electoral process. I think I'll quote a verse in the Bible, now that we are both Christian, that remember when, I don't know which apostle quoted that, when he said, I've run the race, I've finished the fight. That would be the best closure for Raila Odinga. Age has caught up with him. I don't feel there's any more magic he can pull. I also feel his supporters may be fatigued, and the new generation may not be appreciative of the efforts and the sacrifices given to this country compared to the older generation. I happen to be among the last young generation that can connect Raila with our politics. The generation Z under 25 will only read it in history. I feel as an elder statesman, not just in Kenya, but Africa, it's time for him to groom the next group. The same, William Ruto is a follow-up to him. They're not in the same generation. William Ruto is a follow-up generation. William Ruto will hand over to the next generation in the 40s. We are in the 30s. Power has to transcend that way. Uhuru Kenyatta was in the 60s generation because he's in the 60s. Raila is in the 70s. Raila category, last class he had was the Kibakis and the rest. A bit of Uhuru, but now with Uhuru exiting, that is a closure for that generation. William Ruto's generation starts from 45 to 60. They have their moment. The next 5-10 years is theirs for the asking. Rigathi Gachagua falls under the same category. Under 45 will come call, and we are in that generation. 34 to 45, we are in that category. We are the successors of the current generation. So I find it prudent to think for Raila Odinga, it is time to cement the legacy and have a closure on his illustrious political career that will be spoken for the generations to come. Mad respect for the old man.
Notwithstanding what he has achieved politically, yes, you rule out the prospects of Raila in 2027.
I rule out that. The only problem as an analyst is that it's very difficult. We ruled him out in 13, he came back. We ruled him out in 17. Look at 22. He lost by how many thousand votes? 136,000 votes. The percentage was 1 point something percent. Ideally, the country was 50-50. Split into the middle. In fact, I've been having conversation with my colleagues in Kenya Kwanza, and we've been saying absolute respect for Raila Odinga. This was a complete split. And that's why you've seen President William Ruto has been very magnanimous and even went to Homa Bay yesterday and said, leave alone the wazes to me. Mzee, I know how to sort him out because I respect him and he's mentored the rest of us. William Ruto actually acknowledges that mentorship commenced with President Moi, Raila Odinga, Uhuru Kenyatta. He's just a product of the mentorship from the old men. And that's why he has had a mad respect for Raila Odinga, even for the former president. People expected them not to be in talking terms. The first act of service for William Ruto was to appoint Uhuru as an envoy. The same way Uhuru had appointed Raila in 2017, in 2018, to be the ambassador on infrastructure in Africa. And I think this is the legacy I want our viewers to take. It shows the maturity of Kenyan democracy, that as soon as elections are done, you cross the aisle and greet the other side and not see them as opponents or enemies. But personally, I no longer engage in banter. I never even talk of Azimio Kenya Kwanza. It's one government. Where the government will fail, I'll come up and say that's a fail. We need to, like the way I told you, the biggest test we have right now is the cost of living.
Absolutely.
We promised, we must deliver.
Joshua Kiptoo, thank you for your time tonight on Pandit Night. Joshua Kiptoo is the former speaker and the second speaker of Nandi County. Just a reminder that for context and fairness of this discussion, we had invited Caleb Amisi, who is the Member of Parliament for Saboti.